The ontological argument is a famous alleged proof of the existence of God, proposed originally by St. Anselm of Canterbury in the 11th century. The argument goes as follows. God is that which nothing greater can be conceived. Existence is greater than non-existence. It is possible to conceive of God existing, therefore God must necessarily exist. Objections to the argument. A contemporary of St. Anselm, Gaunelo of Marmoutier, claimed that Anselm's argument could be reduced to absurdity, as we could, by his logic, prove that the most perfect anything must necessarily exist, such as, for instance, the most perfect island. To which Anselm replied that unlike other concepts, God's existence is simply necessary. However, this rebuttal fails as it assumes the very thing the argument is trying to prove, namely God's necessary existence, and is therefore circular. A second objection to Anselm's argument came from the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, who argued that existence is not a predicate or property, and therefore can have no bearing on how perfect something is. Existence merely indicates the occurrence of a concept in reality, without adding anything to the concept itself. It was this objection which appeared to finally put the ontological argument to rest. That is, until 1974, when Alvin Plantinga proposed a new form of the ontological argument known as the Modal ontological argument, which uses the idea of possible worlds, which we can think of as universes in the multiverse of possibility, and it goes as follows. God is possible. If God is possible, then he must exist in at least one possible world. If he exists in one possible world, and given that by definition he is necessarily omnipresent, he must exist in all worlds, and if he exists in all worlds, he must exist. There are many objections to this argument. However, I believe the strongest is that the argument itself can be made to work equally well at proving that God does not exist. Here's how that argument goes. It is possible that God does not exist. If it is possible that God does not exist, then God does not exist in at least one possible world. If God does not exist in one possible world, then as a necessarily omnipresent being, he cannot exist in any world, and if he doesn't exist in any world, he cannot therefore exist. To assume the primacy of the possibility that God exists over the possibility that God does not exist in premise 1 is to fall victim once again to a circular argument, and is why the modal ontological argument is logically flawed. Thanks for watching.